You are about to listen to a story inspired by Wegainst, a creature collecting universe. To know more about Wegainst games, stories, books, and apps, access wegainst.com. Now, enjoy the journey where we take your imagination to another world. Previously. They locked the door and left me alone with the sack. That sack looked like it was alive. Then I saw a red, horned thing crawled out to break me and my apex. It didn't take much for that thing to attack me, but I lasted using rope and stubbornness until Apex took a bite meant for me and hit the boards like he was finished. At sunrise, they verdict us broken. They stole my Apex like it was their property now, and I swore I wouldn't let that happen. Then I went for the lockbox. My body didn't agree with the idea. My ribs felt packed with gravel, my knee clicked when I put weight on it, and my hands were so swollen that even making a fist felt like trying to squeeze wet rope through a ring. Dawn light leaked through cracks in the boards and turned the air gray, and every breath tasted like salt and old smoke. The room they left me in wasn't the guild room. It was a side store, hooks on the wall, coils of line on the floor, a bucket that smelled like piss and brine. Someone had wrapped my burns in fresh tape. Someone had done it tight. My fingers throbbed under it like they wanted out. Apex wasn't at my shin. That absence hurt more than the bruises because my body kept checking for him without asking, like a tongue touching a missing tooth. I stood too fast, swayed, and caught myself on a rope rail nailed to the wall. Wet fiber bit my palm through the tape. Outside, the harbor woke up like nothing happened. Chains clanged, men shouted. Waves slapped pilings in that steady, dumb rhythm that never cared about my night. I pushed the door open and stepped into a narrow lane behind the warehouse. Cold air hit my face. Mist stuck to my eyelashes. The boards were slick, and my boot slid on the first step, and my stomach jumped hard enough to make my throat taste metallic. A hand caught my elbow. The sponsor. Dry coat, calm eyes with tired edges, missing finger scar, pale in the morning. "Don't," she said. "I'm taking him," I rasped. "You can't," she said, and she didn't say it like a warning. She said it like a rule. They moved him deeper. 2 doors, 3 eyes. You touch that lockbox, and you don't walk back out. "I don't care," I said. She held my elbow tighter. "You do," she replied. "Because if you die here, Apex stays in a box until someone finds a way to use him." My throat closed. My jaw ached from clenching. The lane felt too narrow, like the walls were leaning in. "Where is he?" I asked. She glanced toward the main dock lane. "On his way," she said. We moved to the mouth of the lane and watched from behind a stack of crates that smelled like fish oil. The boards out there shone wet. Lanterns swung on ropes and threw sick light even in daylight. A small group came through. Clean boots, steady pace. Not running, not hiding. In the middle, 2 people carried an iron lockbox. The same stamp, the same latch, the same shape that had emptied my shin. My chest went hollow. I stepped out. The sponsor yanked me back so hard, my shoulder popped with pain. "Not like this," she hissed. I stared at the lockbox as it passed, my legs twitching like they wanted to chase. I could almost hear Apex inside, even though I knew that was my head being cruel. One of the clean boot people turned their face slightly, like they felt eyes. Their gaze swept the crates. It didn't land on me. It didn't need to. It landed on my sponsor's coat and the missing finger scar. They kept walking. The sponsor exhaled slowly. "They know," she murmured. "They already wrote you." "What do I do?" My voice cracked on the last word. I hated it. She looked at me for a long second, then said the part that made my stomach drop. "You go back in," she said. "You take their deal." "I don't have a deal," I spat. "You will," she replied. "Or you'll watch that box leave the harbor." The dock sounds kept grinding. The lockbox disappeared into a warehouse door that shut with a soft, final thunk. My hands shook. My burns pulsed. My mouth filled with spit like my body was about to puke. The sponsor leaned close. "They're going to collar him," she said. "Not to own him. To own you." I swallowed hard. "And the key?" She nodded once. "Hangs on her throat." My stomach turned cold. Then the sponsor said it, quiet and ugly. "If you want him breathing by tonight, you become useful." I stared at the shut door until my eyes hurt. Short decision. I went back. Inside the guild room, the air was warmer and smelled like boiled tea and wet rope. The lamp hissed above the table. The seated woman sat like she'd never moved, ledger closed, cup steaming. Her calm was the most violent thing in the room. Then I signed the deeper debt. The paper was damp at the edges. The pen scratched like a nail on wood. My hands shook when I put my mark down. Not from fear alone, but from swollen fingers and sleep that never happened. The sponsor stood by the door, silent, jaw tight, not allowed to speak unless spoken to. The seated woman didn't look at my face. She looked at my hands. "You want him back," she said. I didn't answer. She nodded anyway. "You get Apex back," she said. "You do one job. You don't run." A box sat near her boots. Iron latch. Stamped seal. My chest tightened just seeing it. She hooked a finger under the latch and flipped it open. Apex lay inside in plush form, still and wrong, like a heart turned off. Next to him was a collar. Thick metal ring with a small housing on one side, neat as a tool. A wire ran into the clasp. It didn't look like a leash. It looked like a fuse. My breath caught. She lifted Apex out with both hands, careful like she was holding value, not kindness, and set him on the table. Then she slid the collar toward me. "Put it on," she said. My fingers didn't want to move. They moved anyway. The metal was cold enough to sting. I opened the clasp and felt the spring tension fight me, like it wanted to bite shut. Apex was still plush, soft and heavy in my palms, and wrapping bomb metal around his neck made my ribs ache. "Don't," the sponsor whispered behind me. The seated woman's eyes flicked up. "She will." I wrapped the collar around Apex's plush neck and snapped it closed. Click. Small sound. Big damage. The seated woman leaned forward just enough for me to smell tea and oil deep in her coat seams. "You break domain," she said. "You try to disappear. The collar ends him." My mouth tasted like pennies. "Ends him how?" "Spectacularly," she said, like she was talking about a barrel fire. Don't make me clean him off my boards." A long breath wanted to turn into a sob. I swallowed it back. A key hung on a chain at her throat. She let it catch the lamplight on purpose, then tucked it back like bait. "You earn that," she said. "What's the job?" I asked. My voice came out flat. She set a sketch on the table. Rough lines, clear shape. A skull-shaped chest rig. A mouthport thick as a fist. Straps like ribs. Even drawn on paper, it looked like trouble that had learned how to smile. "Skull missile launcher," she said. "Chest slot. Single heavy." I stared at it until the lines blurred. "Who has it?" "Rival leader," she said. "He likes to show it. He thinks it makes him untouchable." "And you want it," I said. "I want it," she corrected. "You steal it." The sponsor shifted behind me. A small protest sound caught in her throat and killed there. The seated woman's voice stayed calm. "Do it clean," she said. "No fires, no crowd. If you bring authority down on us, I won't need the collar. I'll hand you over myself." My pulse hammered in my throat. She watched me for a beat, then said it soft, like advice. "As long as the pain is not mine." The words slid into my head like oil.
Outside, dawn was wet and gray, and the docks shone like they were freshly skinned. Mist stuck to my hair. Salt sat on my tongue. Every surface waited to betray a careless foot. Apex rode in my arms in plush form, collar cold against my wrist when it bumped. I hated carrying him like cargo. I hated worse that I'd agreed to it. The sponsor walked beside me because the deal made her useful again. "Outer lane by the crane," she said. "They move it early." We moved through stacks of crates and hanging nets. My knee complained on every step. My hands throbbed inside tape. The harbor smelled like brine, tar, and old fish guts, and the sound never stopped. Chains, waves, boots, voices that didn't care about my debt. The crane lane was already busy. A heavy hook line swayed above a flatbed cart. 2 men stood near it with clean boots and dry shoulders, the kind of calm that meant they weren't dock workers. A third stood on the cart, coat open, wearing the skull rig on his chest like a crown. The skull mouth faced forward. The teeth were vents. A core behind the teeth pulsed faint, slow as a breath. I didn't need anyone to tell me it was real. The sponsor caught my elbow. "That's not the leader," she said. "That's a carrier. Leader stays back." My hands started doing rope math without permission. Distance, angle, witnesses, exit. The cart sat near a net rack. A lazy knot held a heavy bundle overhead. A crane beam ran above like a loaded spine. If I rushed, I'd get seen. If I waited, it would move. If I made noise, authority would come, and authority meant my name spreading like oil. Windows don't appear. You make them. I slipped behind a crate stack and pulled out my hook and cord. The tape on my burns snagged on the coil. Pain flashed white. I kept moving. I tossed the hook up. It caught the crane's side beam with a dull thunk. The line ran through my hands, rough and wet, and I fed it slow, using friction like a friend. I looped it around the net bundle's tie point, then gave a short pull. The lazy knot hated being tested. It slipped. The net bundle dropped like a wet curtain across the carrier's legs and the cart edge, heavy with damp rope and old fish stink. The carrier cursed and staggered, arms windmilling. One guard lunged to catch him.
The skull rig swung with the carrier's body. The sponsor shoved me forward. I went in low. I didn't punch. I didn't shout. I grabbed the straps where they crossed under his arm, found the buckle, and snapped it open with my thumb, like I was undoing a knot. The carrier tried to shove me off with his shoulder, but the net had his feet, and the cart rail bit his hip, and balance left him for half a second. Half a second was all rope ever needs. I ripped the chest rig free. The skull mouth faced me for a blink. The vents plicked once, soft, like teeth settling. Then I turned and ran. Behind me, someone yelled. Boots slapped wet boards. The crane hook swung wild as the net tugged the line, and metal rang sharp enough to turn heads. A dock worker, thin, hood up, stepped out to see the noise. A guard grabbed him instead of chasing me. The kid's hands went up, palms out, confusion all over his face as his day turned into blame. I saw it over my shoulder. My stomach rolled. I kept running. We cut into a side lane under an overhang that smelled like fuel and wet wood. My lungs burned. My knee buckled once and held. The skull rig sat in my hands, heavy and warm, straps dangling like guts. "You got it," the sponsor said. I stared at the lane behind us, thinking about the worker kid being dragged somewhere he didn't understand. The sponsor's eyes stayed hard. "Don't," she warned. "That's not your line." I looked down at Apex in my arms. Plush, collar, silent. It was my line now. We ducked into a tool shed with no window and one weak lamp. Rust stink bit my nose. Hooks hung on nails. Coils of rope lay in piles like sleeping snakes. I set Apex down on my belt and laid the skull rig on the bench. Up close, it was uglier. The skull face wasn't decoration. It was structure. The mouth port was thick and scorched around the edges, like it had eaten heat 100 times. The straps were built to take recoil. The core behind the teeth pulsed, slow, steady, dumb as a heart. "It fires one heavy," I said. The sponsor nodded. "Slow, big, backblast." My hands remembered the key glinting on the seated woman's throat. My hands remembered the collar clicking shut. I touched the mouth port. Warm metal, oil smell, smoke baked into it. The sponsor watched me. "Don't get clever," she said. I didn't answer. I reached for the side plate screws. They were shallow, meant for quick maintenance. I turned one with a flat tool and felt it resist, then give. The plate came free with a soft scrape. Inside was a guide channel, a firing tube, and a baffle that directed pressure forward. Simple. Brutal. Built like a cannon you wore on your ribs. I thought about rope. A knot doesn't care why you tie it. If you thread it wrong, it holds wrong. If you flip one loop, the load turns and bites you. I loosened the baffle plate and rotated it just enough that forward pressure would catch instead of slide. I slipped a thin shim of metal under the brace so the tube sat offline by a hair. Not enough to stop the shot, enough to send it home. The sponsor grabbed my wrist, hard. "Stop," she said, voice shaking now. "If she dies, she put a bomb on his neck," I said. My voice came out calmer than I felt. She already chose. The sponsor stared at my hands like she didn't know me. I put the plate back on and tightened the screws. My fingers shook when I cinched the last one. I wiped sweat on my sleeve. The skull rig sat quiet, waiting. It would fire. it would just fire wrong once. Back in the guild room, the lamp hissed like nothing in the world had shifted. The seated woman waited with her ledger closed, key still on her chain. "Set it down," she said. I set the skull rig on the table. Her eyes lit quick, greedy. She didn't touch it right away. She watched me, testing for fear, guilt, lies. I gave her nothing. She reached out and ran her fingers across the skull's teeth fence. Click. Soft habit. "Single heavy," she said. Yes. She lifted it and strapped it on herself without help. The straps crossed her back. The skull face settled on her chest, mouth aimed forward. She turned slightly, like she wanted me to see her wearing war. "You did well," she said, and it sounded like a joke. Then she primed it. The skull vents opened a fraction. The rig hummed low. The lamp flame stretched sideways for a blink, like the air sensed heat coming. My stomach clenched. My palms went wet under tape. I stayed still. "We test," she said. She raised her chin toward a clear section of wall and put her finger on the trigger plate under the skull jaw. The sponsor made a small sound behind me, like she wanted to pull me back through time. I didn't move. The seated woman fired. The skull mouth coughed once, deep and heavy, a sound that hit my chest like a fist. A slow missile pushed out. Then the pressure caught wrong, and the whole shot snapped backward into her ribs with a brutal thump that folded her like a cut line under load. The blast stayed tight, but it still threw her chair back and knocked the ledger off the table. She hit the floor hard. Smoke curled from the skull mouth. The room went silent in that squeezed airway. Not chosen quiet, but stunned quiet, brains hunting for a rule that fit. The keychain snapped when she fell. The key skittered across the boards. I dropped. My knees hit wet wood. Pain flashed. I didn't care. I grabbed the key, fingers fumbling, tape slipping, metal biting skin. I turned to Apex and jammed it into the collar clasp. It resisted. My hands shook harder. I forced it. Click. The collar unlocked. The metal ring loosened. Heat rushed through Apex. Fabric tightened. Then muscle took over. He woke low to the ground, fur bristling, red eyes bright and furious, and his first breath sounded like a growl he'd been holding all night. The sponsor moved first, stepping between me and the doorway as the other guild hands remembered they had bodies. One reached for me. Another reached for Apex. Someone shouted my doc name like it was Annette. "Rope hands!" Apex launched at the closest hand. Not to kill, but to push space back, headbutting wrist bone with that wet crack that makes people rethink choices. The hand jerked away. The room shifted from stunned to violent. I snatched the skull rig off the seated woman's chest without looking at her face. It was hot enough to burn through cloth. I didn't let go. The sponsor grabbed my elbow. "Move," she hissed. We ran. We hit the door in a shove and burst into dock air that smelled like salt and smoke and morning. Behind us, boots pounded. Organized, steady, not drunk and stupid. The kind of chase that doesn't tire fast. Apex stayed at my shin like a blade. The open collar clasp sat in my pocket like a dead snake. We cut between crates and nets, and people turned to stare, and I felt the harbor's eyes wake up and lock on. Somewhere behind us, a voice called an order that carried over the whole lane. "Close the piers!" Another voice, calm, clean, followed it, louder than it should have been. Authority voice. Ledger voice. "Don't kill her," it called. "Bring her in. The we go too." The sponsor shoved me toward a narrow lane that stank of fish guts and oil. My boots slid once. My heart jumped into my throat. I caught myself on a rope rail, wet fiber biting raw skin, and the pain anchored me like a hook. Apex tapped once as we ran. Tap. Stay with me. My lungs burned. My knee screamed. The skull rig burned against my ribs, heat and weight and war in my arms. Dawn lights spread across the harbor like nothing happened, like the world didn't care who lived or died in back lanes. But I cared. I cared so much, it felt ugly. As we disappeared into the wet maze of Oreth, one thought kept looping in my head, smooth and fast, like a rope trance I couldn't stop. As long as the pain is not mine.
This story arc ends here. See you in the next We Gainst adventure.